And we can have 3 different outcomes of symbiosis, and there's actually a poster there in the back that describes symbiosis and the 3 types of symbiosis. And the types of symbiosis are classified according to whether the symbiotic partners benefit from the relationship, or if they're harmed from the relationship, or maybe it's neutral, right? Okay, so the 3 types of symbiosis are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. We're only going to talk about fungi that are involved in mutualistic relationships and parasitic relationships. And also, folks, just so you don't panic, I'm probably going to be erasing part of the board and adding some details, and I might then erase again. But I just want you to know the white little flowsheet over there, it's got all the key points that I'll be putting on the board. So just so you don't panic that I'm erasing something before you've had a chance to write it down. Okay. All right, so in mutualism is when both symbiotic partners benefit. And we have 2 examples of mutualism where fungi are involved. The first one are called lichens, and lichens are symbiotic relationships between fungi and a photosynthetic partner. And the photosynthetic partner will be either algae or cyanobacteria. Okay, so one of your colleagues made this great lichen poster. Okay, and there's additional examples of lichens here, but I'll just bring this up. Okay, so you all are probably really familiar with lichens already, and maybe you just didn't even know that these were lichens. But we've got a lovely cross-section here that your colleague made. And we see in this cross-section through a lichen, we've got the fungal partner forming the filaments. The fungi is going to help anchor the algae or cyanobacterium on a surface in nature, for example, on a rock, maybe the side of a tree. It could be on some man-made structure like a building. So the fungi provide support and attachment to a surface that will receive sunlight. And of course, that's a huge benefit to the symbiotic partner, the algae or cyanobacteria, because they need sunlight to carry out oxygenic photosynthesis. Okay? So if we looked at the cross-section of the lichen, we'd see the filamentous fungal hyphae, and then we'd see these beautiful green cyanobacteria or algae. So this lovely combination here. Now, the beneficial part of the algae and cyanobacterium is because they're carrying out oxygenic photosynthesis. They're making sugars that the fungi can then use. Remember, fungi are chemoheterotrophs just like us. They have to have preformed organic molecules. They can't carry out photosynthesis. So their dynamite little partner here carries out photosynthesis, makes the sugars, and literally feeds it to the fungi. The fungi use it as a source of carbon and energy. The fungi create the scaffolding that supports the bacteria and algae where sunlight is available. And it's also believed that fungi help with mineral absorption and possibly with water absorption as well. Both substances, of course, the little photosynthetic partners need. So it's a win-win relationship. Now, in this poster, your colleague did a great job describing 3 different types of lichen based on structure. And I just want to let you guys know, I usually don't ask you to identify the specific type of lichen, but let me just walk through them. So we have fruticose, foliose, and crustose lichen. Okay, so just so you know, I won't give you an example of lichen and ask you to classify it. But again, just so you all know, crustose are lichens that are tightly adherent to the surface that they're growing on. Okay, so as it explains here, usually you're going to cause some damage if you try to rip them off. Foliose, I like the description here. It's foliose lichens are almost like they're little pieces of aluminum foil. So they're growing almost like a little leaf-like structure. So there'll be a free edge with foliose lichen here. And fruticose lichen grow almost like a little bush. Okay, so they have free ends here, and they are growing like in elevated structures away from the surface, the anchor surfaces here. Okay, so again, I won't ask you to identify specifically if they're fruticose, foliose, or crustose lichen, but what I will ask you is, what is a lichen? And so what would you tell me? What is a lichen?
Combination of green algae or cyanobacterium
Right.
and fungus.
And we'd love for you to throw in there, you know, symbiotic relationship or mutualistic relationship, right? So you're using that terminology. That is dynamite. Good. Okay, I just had another thought. I forgot what it was. Oh, I know what it was. What we'll try to set up is a wet mount of a lichen shake. And these are just way fun. What we'll do is we'll take some of the lichen and we'll put it in the blender with a little bit of water. We'll blend it, and then we'll make a wet mount. And what's really fun is looking at it under the microscope. You'll be able to identify the long filamentous fungal hyphae and then the little green photosynthetic cells, whether they be algae or cyanobacteria. So the lichen shake is fun. It's fun to look at. Okay, so win-win, mutualism. Another example of mutualism in which fungi are involved is the symbiotic relationship we call mycorrhiza. Now this prefix myco means fungi, rhiza means root. So mycorrhiza are symbiotic relationships between plants and fungi. And specifically, what happens is the fungi are going to grow around the plant roots. Now again, this is a win-win situation. The plant is carrying out oxygenic photosynthesis in the portions of the plant above the ground, exposed to sunlight. The plant is making sugars. The sugars will be transported to the roots, where the fungi can use them as a source of carbon and energy. Okay, so then we want to ask, well, what the heck are the fungi doing for the plant? Well, again, we see some of the same functions. It's believed that the fungi will help with mineral absorption, and those minerals that the fungi absorb will be shared with the plant. It's thought they may help with water absorption. And to me, this is so fascinating because I love growing plants. I never realized that many plants struggle to grow unless they have their fungal partner. These mycorrhizal relationship is really important for the growth of many plants. If their fungal partner helps them to be healthy, to grow stronger, to produce more. And so to me, I always thought, well, I always think of fungi as like causing plants to decay, or, I think of fungal plant pathogens, and I never realized how important fungi are for the health of plants to help them grow. So what you'll be looking at, as described in your lab manual, is you'll be looking at your microbe boxes, and slides 51 through 54, slides 51 through 54 are cross-sections through plant roots that have been colonized with fungi. So slides 51 through 54 are mycorrhiza slides. Now you'll notice that there's two different descriptions of the mycorrhiza, and I'll tell you which one that I'll put on the lab practical. So the ectomycorrhiza. In ectomycorrhiza, the fungal hyphae do not penetrate the plant cell walls. So you'll see the fungal hyphae, and what's lovely about, and this is slides 51 and 52, what's really nice about these slides is you'll see a cross-section through the root, and the root will be a dark-staining central structure, and then it's almost like a cloak or a coat of these white, non-pigmented filaments. Okay, so the central portion is the cross-section through the root of the plant root. And what do you think these filaments are on the outside? What are they? What do you think those white thread-like filaments are on the outside of the root? If this is a mycorrhiza, what could those filaments be? Yeah, those are the fungal hyphae, right? Okay, good. And again, in ectomycorrhiza, the fungi don't penetrate, they don't digest their way through the plant cell walls. They stay on the outside of the plant root cells. Slides 53 and 54 are called endomycorrhiza. And in endomycorrhiza, the fungi, they do digest their way through the plant cell wall, and they grow between the plant cell wall and the plant cell cytoplasmic membrane. They don't penetrate, they don't punch their way through the plant cytoplasmic membrane. They grow in the space between the plant cell wall and the plant cytoplasmic membrane. and hence they're called endomycorrhiza. Now, for the lab practical, because to me the ectomycorrhiza, it's easy, it's the easiest slide to distinguish the plant partner and the fungal partner. I like to use the ectomycorrhiza slide on the lab practical. But please, you guys, it's so cool looking at the endomycorrhiza slides too. It's just, they're really fun. I know you guys are tired and stressed, but these are really cool. Nature is so wild, you know, all these wonderful relationships going on out there in nature. Okay, so those are our two examples of fungi that are involved in mutualistic symbiotic relationship. So again, you guys, just to quiz you, what are lichens?
Symbiotic
Oh, that was good. I like that. Symbiotic relationships between
fungus and algae and
fungi
cyanobacteria.
and photosynthetic partner, either cyanobacterium or algae. Dynamite, you guys. What are mycorrhiza? What are mycorrhiza? Symbiotic relationship between fungi and plants, you know, right. Again, where are the fungi growing in mycorrhiza?
Plant root.
On the plant roots, that's right, around the plant roots. Good job, you guys, excellent. Okay. Okay. I had this like brief little flash and I just forgot it. Hopefully it'll come back to me. Okay. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna discuss the type of symbiotic relationship in which one partner benefits, and in this case it's gonna be the fungi, but the other partner is harmed or hurt. So the kind of symbiotic relationships in which one partner benefits and the other partner is harmed, it's called parasitism. So when we talk about these parasitic fungi, we're talking about fungi that cause harm to humans, to animals, to plants, for example. Okay. So fungal diseases have a fancy name. They're called mycoses. That's the plural form, or mycosis. IS ending is the singular form. So now we're going to talk about some fungal pathogens that cause mycoses, fungal diseases. Now, there's two broad types of fungal disease. The one type that we'll talk about at the very end is when fungi produce toxins and they cause harm when we swallow or ingest the toxins. Okay, we'll leave this to the very end, our discussion of fungal toxins called mycotoxins. What we're first going to focus on is the type of disease caused by fungi when they grow on us or in us, or it could be other animals as well. So these fungi that grow on us or in us, the type of diseases they cause are often grouped according to, are the fungi growing on the surface of our skin or our mucous membranes, or are they invading deeper? So we're just going to look at two types of fungal infections, and it turns out there's many more than this, but just to give us a little flavor, a little appetizer. Okay. So we're going to look at parasitic fungi that can infect us, and we'll first look at superficial infections, and I'm going to describe superficial infections as those in which the fungi are living on the surface of our skin or on the surface of our mucous membranes. They aren't invading deeper below the natural barriers of our body. Okay. So we'll describe two types of superficial infections depending on location. If the fungi are colonizing our keratinized tissues, and keratin is a very strong protein. It's hydrophobic. It provides a lot of structural support to different parts of our body. So keratinized tissue we find in the top layer of our skin that, help me out you guys, is stratified, keratinized, stratified, squamous, epithelial. Is that right? Did I say that right? Yeah. Dr. Coleman would be so proud of me. Okay. All right, so the outermost layer of the skin, keratin rich. Our hair is chock full of keratin, and our fingernails is full of keratin. Now we said keratin is a really strong protein, and one of the advantages of keratin is very few organisms make an enzyme to destroy keratin. What do you think an enzyme that could digest or hydrolyze keratin, what would we call that, do you think? Keratinase, right? Okay. It turns out there are some fungi that produce keratinase, so consequently they can use our keratin as a source of carbon and energy. They can use our keratin as a source of food, right? So where do you think they're going to live? On keratinized tissue, our skin, our hair, our nails, right? Okay, so the group of fungi that can cause infections of keratinized tissues, they're called, this is an old kind of historical name, but it's still around, they're called dermatophytes. Now, derma comes from skin, okay? Phyte, this ending, it usually refers to a plant. So this is a historical leftover from years ago when people thought fungi were plants. They didn't realize they were a whole different type of organism. So dermatophytes, it literally means skin plants, and like I said, the name is we know it's not a correct name anymore, but we still use it. So what's unique about the fungal dermatophytes is they make this unusual enzyme keratinase. Okay, so let me just give you just a little bit more detail here, you guys. And again, the details I put up here are on that fungal symbiosis chart back there, so please don't panic if I end up erasing it before you've had a chance to copy it, because all the information is over there on that chart as well. So we just want to add just a few more details with regard to dermatophytes. Let me see if I can find my little okay. So if we're looking at the dermatophytes, what was the name of the unusual enzyme they make?
Keratinase.
Keratinase, good. All right, so you want to know that, right? You want to know that. Now, for bonus, and so if you're feeling overwhelmed, just don't worry about this. I want to give you the genus names of the three groups of fungi that are considered dermatophytes. Okay, so it's bonus. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't worry about it. But they are Trichophyton, Microsporum, and Epidermophyton. Now, with regard to how we become infected, there are three general reservoirs for dermatophytes, and some species will have one reservoir and other species will have a different reservoir, but all I would like you guys to know is that the three general reservoirs, and the reservoirs, the sources of these dermatophytes, of course they include humans, but also they include non-human animals, and also the environment, so soil or dirt can be a source of the fungi. Okay. Now, the reason animals, it's important for us to know that animals can act as a reservoir, is that very often if, say, a patient presents and they've got a dermatophyte infection of their skin, what you should ask them is, have you recently adopted a new what? Kitten or puppy, right? If it could be a horse, if it's somebody living on a farm, it could be a cow, because all these animals can act as sources of dermatophytes. But usually, especially if it's a little child, you want to ask the parents, have you recently adopted a new kitten or a puppy? Because often the kittens or puppies, they can have the dermatophyte infections and then transfer it to the children. So do you guys know, what do we call diseases that can be transferred from non-human animals to people? What do we call those diseases? Zoonoses, right? So some of these are what we call zoonotic. Some of these dermatophytes are zoonotic. We can acquire the infection from infected non-human animals. So that's just important for us to know. Okay, now it turns out that when the early descriptions of some of these dermatophyte infections, let me see if I can just cartoon this for you. Usually what happens is that at the initial inoculum site, you'll have some inflammation, and then your immune response starts to kick in, and so you'll get clearing, and the redness, the inflammation will decrease, but then you'll start getting this spreading lesion, sometimes these ring-like areas of inflammation. And so in the old days, people thought it was a worm. They thought it was a worm that was growing outward. And so what would they call this type of, yeah, they'd call it ringworm, right? They call it ringworm. That's a common name for these infections. Okay, but we know it's not a worm, right? It's a fungus, right? Okay, but the name has stuck. So folks commonly refer to these dermatophyte infections as ringworm. And it's also kind of crept into the medical literature because worm, a fancy term for worm is tinea. So often you'll see these dermatophyte infections described as tinea followed by the location in the body. where the infection is occurring. So for example, Tinea capitis would be a ringworm infection, a dermatophyte infection of what part of your body? Your head, the scalp, right? Okay. Often, just so you guys know, dermatophytes, they can infect the actual hairs themselves and cause the hair to break off or fall out. So what you'll often see is one of the initial signs is hair loss, called alopecia, right? So your hair starts falling out in little patches. Okay. Tinea capitis, so we have ringworm of the head. If we had ringworm like here, my arm or my body, maybe the trunk of my body, Tinea corporis. Okay. This is another example, Tinea unguium. This is infections of our nails. And boy, these are tough infections to get cleared up. A fancy term for dermatophyte infections of the nails, if you want to impress your friends at a party, it's called onychomycosis. And again, this is when we have dermatophyte infections of our fingernails or our toenails. And again, very often, very hard to get cleared up. And a lot of the antifungal drugs sometimes are really hard on your patients. So sometimes they just choose, I don't even want to try to treat it. Okay, so again, the tinea referring to this historical thing of being a worm, and then the part of the body that is involved with the dermatophyte infection is added here. Now, I wouldn't ask you to describe, I wouldn't give you one of these phrases and ask you to describe what it means. It's just good for you to know because you see this terminology used so often. But I would like you to be able to provide some common names for dermatophyte infections. You already gave me one, ringworm. Okay. Another one, maybe you guys have heard of athlete's foot. Athlete's foot. And as long as we're talking about athletes, what about jock itch? Yeah, all of these are fungal infections. And again, a lot of them are really hard to get cleared up. Phagocytosis is a major defense mechanism that we have. So initially, we really rely on our neutrophils to phagocytize the invading phagocytosis to destroy the fungi before they have a chance to really colonize us. Once the fungi have established an infection, then we have to rely on what's called cell-mediated immunity, TMI. And for many people, it can take, like up to 2 years before their CMI can clear some of these fungal infections. And in many people, their CMI never can clear the infection. Yeah, so then that's when you have to make the decision. Is it worth treating with one of the more powerful antifungal agents? And there's a lot of pros and cons depending on them. Okay, so that is our dermatophytes, our dermatophyte infections. Very good.